All right. So we usually, when we're doing or transthoracic echo, we usually start with the parasternal long axis view. So you get your probe. You either put the patient on the left side. Some technician will do the patient lying flat. There are different techniques of doing your scan. But anyway, you put your gel on your transducer probe, and then you put the probe in specific area, and you're going to manipulate it to get the view that you're supposed to get. So you need to know in your mind's eye what the views look like, because you're trying to achieve that view. Okay, so we start with the parasternal long axis. Your transducer is in the third or fourth intercostal space. The marker is towards the patient's right shoulder, and you're going to adjust it, and you'll get the image. And we can run over those images. We're not gonna do the complete lecture, but we can run over it. So with your parasternal long axis view, okay, your transducer is in the third or fourth intercostal space. The marker is towards the right shoulder, and you're going to adjust it. And this is what you're supposed to get in your parasternal long axis view. Okay, that's your RV. Aortic valve is right there. Your left atrium, your anterior mitral leaflet, posterior wall, LV cavity. Okay, this is your parasternal long axis. In diastole because the mitral valve is open. Okay, septum. All right, systole, when the mitral valve is closed, and systole, the aortic valve is open. You need to know what measurements you're going to get. In diastole, you measure your septum, you measure your LV cavity dimension in diastole, and you measure your posterior wall. You also measure the aortic root. You measure your aortic root also in diastole, okay? In systole now, you measure you don't measure the aortic root in systole, okay? But even though it's there, you measure your left atrium, you measure LV cavity size in systole, okay? So those are your systolic measurements. Now to get the RV inflow view, you move the angle of your transducer downwards and towards the down and medially, so inferior medially, and you're gonna get this view. Okay, this is your RV inflow view. RV inflow because this is the right atrium, right ventricle. Your tricuspid valve is right there. This is the anterior leaflet, posterior leaflet. This is your LV cavity. Okay. Okay, so that's your RV view. To get your short axis now, if you're going to get the short axis at the level of the aorta, you rotate from the parasternal long axis view. You're going to rotate your transducer clockwise to about the 1 o'clock position, 1 or 2 o'clock position. You're going to pull the angle of the transducer downwards. So the face of the transducer is looking upwards. And this is your short axis view at the level of the aorta. All right, so that's your aortic valve when it's open. The aortic valve is open in systole. It's closing diastole, closing the Mercedes-Benz sign. Okay, and you should be able to label the structures in the short axis at the level of the aorta. This is your right ventricular flow tract. Your pulmonary valve is right there. The aortic valve is open. The aortic valve is open. That's your left atrium, atrial septum. That's your right atrium, your tricuspid valve. This is the septal leaflet right here. The anterior leaflet is right there. Okay. So from the short axis view now, so remember the angle of your transducer is downwards. So you're going to gradually move it upwards. And again, these are fine finesse movements. So you're going to gradually move it upward and you'll get the mitral valve coming into view. This is the anterior leaflet, posterior leaflet. So this is the ventricular septum is right there. This is the anterior wall, lateral wall is over there. This is the inferior wall. We have a separate class to name the segment, so don't worry about that. Okay, that's your mitral valve right there. Mitral valve uh, is open in diastole, closed in systole. LV cavity is right there, the right ventricular cavity. So if you move it even further downwards, sorry, further upward, the angle of the transducer now, you're moving it upwards, and you're going to get the papillary muscle coming into view. This is the anterior lateral papillary muscle, posterior medial papillary muscle, inferior wall right here. This is the lateral wall, the anterior wall, and this is our septal wall. Okay, so posterior medial papillary muscle, anterior lateral papillary muscle. Okay, so if you move your transducer angle even further upward, you get the apex of the heart. So this is what the apex of the heart looks like. Inferior wall is there, anterior wall, septum, lateral wall. So we'll move to the apical four-chamber view. You take your transducer and you put it where we call the apex of the heart. Or what you can do is find the fourth or fifth intercostal space, and where that intersect with the mid-clavicular line, you put your transducer right there. Okay? The fourth or fifth intercostal space at the mid-clavicular line, where those 2 points intersect, you put your transducer, you put your marker. The marker of the transducer is the 4 or 5 o'clock position, and you're just going to adjust it, and you get the heart standing straight up like this. Okay? In diastole, mitral valve is open. In systole, mitral valve is closed. Okay? LV cavity, mitral valve, left atrium, descending aorta, atrial septum, right atrium, tricuspid valve, right ventricle, septum. Okay? To get your apical two-chamber view, you're gonna turn from where you get your apical 4, you're gonna turn the transducer counterclockwise, not clockwise, counterclockwise. Okay, so you need to know you need to know the direction that your clock moves in. Okay, this is counterclockwise. You move it just a little bit counterclockwise, and you're going to get your apical two-chamber view. You're going to get something looking like this. This is the inferior wall. This is the anterior wall. Anterior wall, LV cavity, mitral valve, left atrium, inferior wall. To get your apical three-chamber view, you're going to turn your transducer even more counterclockwise and tilt it. So you need to have these pictures, views in your mind. So this is what you're going to get. Okay, this is the apical three-chamber view. That is your anterior septum, LV cavity, the aorta and the left atrium, mitral valve. This is your inferior lateral wall. Okay, to get your apical five-chamber view, in the apical four-chamber view position, of course, remember your transducers at the junction of the fourth or fifth intercostal space with the mid-clavicular line. Your pointer on the transducer is towards the 4 or 5 o'clock position, and you get your four-chamber view. If you tilt it a little, if you tilt it downwards a little bit, very, very fine, precise movement, you get your five-chamber view. Five-chamber because now you can see your aortic valve and your ascending aorta. The moderator band is over there. Okay, so that's your mitral valve, the posterior leaflet. Your left, this is actually the left upper pulmonary vein. This is the right upper, not lower. Your aortic valve is right there, the anterior mitral leaflet. So that's your five-chamber view. Now we're going to go to the subcostal view. So this is when you're finishing up your study now. So the subcostal view, remember where you have the xiphoid process? You're going to put the transducer in the subxiphoid area. So just below the xiphoid process. So We did anatomy for a reason. So you need to know where the xiphoid process is, and you're going to put the transducer in the subxiphoid area, just below the xiphoid process. The marker and the transducer is pointed to the patient's head, and you're going to look at the IVC, the inferior vena cava. Okay, so this is your inferior vena cava right here, and the inferior vena cava drains into the right atrium. Okay, this is your hepatic vein. Hepatic vein drains into the inferior vena cava. Very important view. That's the liver. Okay, that's the right atrium. The inferior vena cava drains into the right atrium. Hepatic vein, which drains into the inferior vena cava. Okay, and when we measure the IVC, we usually measure it just before you get to the hepatic vein. So it's very important to measure it. We measure the IVC in all of our studies. Okay. Now, from the IVC view, remember the marker was pointing towards the head. If you turn the transducer clockwise now and tilt it and adjust it, you get this image. So you can see this image is very important because you can see the right atrium up here, the right ventricle down there. You can also see the interventricular septum and the atrial septum. So this is a very important view if you're looking for septal defects. Okay, if you're looking for pericardial effusion. Okay, so it's a very important view. The liver is right there, the right ventricle is right there, the ventricular septum, the left ventricle, the atrial septum, the left atrium, and the right atrium. Okay, all right, so that concludes our subcostal view. So the subcostal view, the transducer is placed in just below the xiphoid process, and you get your IVC first, and then you rotate it clockwise to get your right atrium, right ventricle. You look at the ventricular septum, the atrial septum, and you can also look at the pericardial space to see if there's pericardial fluid as well. Also, you can measure the thickness of the RV wall from this view. Okay, you can measure the thickness of the RV wall, which is another very important measurement. All right, so the suprasternal view now, you're going to put the transducer in the suprasternal notch. The transducer is placed in the suprasternal notch, and the marker, remember your marker in either an indentation or it will be marked. The marker will be marked. So the marker is pointing to the patient's head. You're going to turn the transducer right and adjust to obtain the image. And this is the image you're going to get. So I'm not sure if it projects very well, but this is the ascending aorta right here. This is the aortic arch, and then the descending aorta. So the aorta comes up, it bends over, and it goes down. Ascending aorta, aortic arch, and descending aorta. Extremely important view if the patient is going to have coarctation. Sometimes you can see dissection. You can see a lot of stuff. So it's a very important view. You have to do it. Okay. So if you remember your anatomy, coming off the aortic arch, you have the left subclavian artery, then you get the left subclavian, you have the left subclavian artery, the left common carotid artery, and then further you'll have the innominate. Remember, your innominate divides into your right subclavian and the right common carotid. Okay, so you have to know your anatomy. Okay, so this is this suprasternal notch view. Okay, ascending aorta, arch, descending aorta, left subclavian, left common carotid. The innominate is over here, which divides into your right subclavian and the right common carotid. This is your right pulmonary artery. So just below your aortic arch, you have the right pulmonary artery. Okay. All right. So that concludes your scanning view. Um, if you guys want me to play a video of the whole thing, I can do that. Um, so